Good evening, everyone. Yay! I feel a buzz in the air. uh, a quick hello to our live stream audience, the people who can't be here tonight. And just to update you, we did a field project today with our presenter, and we had 40 people attending our field project. So the island of Saba is interested in bees. So welcome, everyone. So thank you for coming. We're going to get started. First, we thank Carib Trans for providing our live streaming services. Our speaker tonight is sponsored by the Cottage Club Hotel, and they've been a sponsor of ours for many years. That means it's a whole cooperative effort of how we put our program on, and one way is that our hotels support providing accommodations for our speakers. This program would not be possible without the generous financial support of Prince Bernhard Culture Funds and public entities, Saba, and the many different sponsors on the island who contribute in many ways, in-kind ways, financial support, support of the speakers, the venues, different ways. So be sure when you're seeing these businesses on the island and off the island that you give them a little thank you. Okay, so what's coming up next? Well, the next presentation night is Paul Sickle. He's in the crowd tonight, the guy with the deadhead shirt on. If you recognize Paul, he has been a presenter before. He's a super interesting guy. And the talk on Monday night will be parasites, host-parasite interactions, and it will be at Chez Booba, and they have a special dinner option that night as well. And then Tuesday night, for all you divers, he's going to do a special night dive to teach you more about his work and a follow-up thereafter, the coming days thereafter, because he's actually doing real research while he is on the island. At 1 o'clock on Wednesday at the Fort Bay, there will be a snorkel survey with Ian Hewson. He arrives on a flight tomorrow night, so we can't point him out in the crowd yet. So you don't have to be a diver for that. That is specifically a snorkeling field project. So sign up at the tent, send us a message. Either way, we can get to you. Then, if you do participate in a field project, you get a complimentary T-shirt or tank top. So we gave away 40 of those today. They are ethically sourced, made from recycled materials. If you haven't tried it yet, you got to feel on top of the world with a Saba Cloud Top. It's a beer inspired by spice and specifically made for our 20th anniversary event. So raise your hand, raise your can. There we go. Thank you, everyone. So tonight's speaker, about a month ago, we work on this program all year. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, so about a month ago, Emily and I were, okay, which venue is where, what makes sense? Well, a lot of factors contribute to that. So the size of the location, the restaurant schedules, because everybody's closed a different night. But oftentimes the choices are kind of difficult. We got to make sure we're fair on things. But for hosting a bee presentation, Busy Bee was the obvious choice. Here we are. Okay, so Dr. Maura Scanlon is originally from Buffalo, New York, where she completed her master's degree in fisheries biology. After graduating, she worked along the Great Lakes with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She then decided to move to Florida and become an educator at St. Petersburg College. While teaching about the importance of pollinators, Maura became interested in bees and beekeeping. After joining the Pinellas Beekeepers Association, she has been instrumental as a board member, acting as a liaison between the college and the association. She arranges for the college to host monthly meetings with guest speakers and helped establish an educational apiary on campus property, which she maintains. There, she manages her bees and educates students and community members, providing them with hands-on experience. With all this buzz, this promises to be a great presentation. Please welcome Maura Scanlon.
I loved all the puns. Those were great. My husband does a lot of those. I just want to thank See and Learn for hosting me, and I've met so many nice people. We arrived on Wednesday, and I was like, I don't know anybody, but over, I think, the last 2 or 3 days, we've just met so many wonderful people, and so I just appreciate everything that's been going on here. It's been wonderful. And let's see. So tonight, my talk is just going to be on pollinators. It's a general talk. If you are interested in more specific things like bee biology or different things like that, you can ask me after the presentation. The topic of bees is so wide-reaching. I mean, I could give a presentation that lasts for 10 years because there's so many things you can talk about bees. So for this particular talk, we'll be talking a little bit about bees, a lot about pollinators, and also what you can do to help. So a little bit about me. I know we had the introduction, but I do teach environmental science and biology at the St. Petersburg College Seminole campus in Florida. And I also serve on many advisory boards, including the Pinellas County IFAS extension. So that will come into play a little bit later in my presentation. There I am. So I am a certified master beekeeper through the University of Florida, and I also serve on the board of the Pinellas Beekeepers Association. So if you ever want to Google what we do or different things like that, those are just kind of a couple of our symbols. And that's me in the veil holding some of my bees on the campus apiary. And just to give you kind of a quick overview of what that campus looks like, if we look over here, this kind of whole green space is the campus. A lot of our buildings are down here. And right up at the top, right up there, is our apiary. So I've kind of zoomed in a little bit. And so this is more of our apiary. So all those little white dots are actually different beehives. And then this is kind of what it looks like on the ground. So that's where I'm working from, and that's where I usually get my bees. When I do presentations like this, I usually bring a demonstration hive where you can see the bees in action and the queen is marked and everything like that. But I didn't think that the plane pilots would appreciate me bringing a bunch of live bees, and my next door neighbors would probably not appreciate that as well. So, but before I begin, I do have my husband here. This is Brian. You can call him Mr. Bee Lady. He doesn't mind. And then my 2 lovely daughters who were dying to come here. And I said, nope, it's just a mommy and daddy trip. And I'll just tell you, this is the first trip we've been on by ourselves since like our honeymoon. So it's raising kids, it's a whole different thing. But anyways, so that's just a little bit of background about me, so you know who I am and where I'm coming from. So as I said before, we're going to just kind of cover 3 different topics: save the bees, pollinators, and how you can help. So have you heard the slogan, save the bees? Yeah, everybody, save the bees, right? So with the bees, pollinators, in agriculture, this is just from Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. It was kind of a poster similar to the Caribbean that I have. I couldn't find one particular for your island. This just kind of is a quick overview of some of the pollinators and some of the fruits and flowers that they are going to be visiting. You should know that pollinators are very important. So 90% of the world's food is produced by only about 100 crops. But out of those, 170% depend on pollinators. So that other 30% is going to be wind pollinated. That's going to be corn and wheat and different things like that. But otherwise, we have to rely on pollinators. So when I say pollinator, everybody thinks of the honeybee, right? So the public tends to focus on the honeybee. And it's for a couple different reasons. First of all, it's a generalist pollinator, so it's going to visit a lot of different flowers, a lot of different crops. It is the farmer's friend. It will, when you put it down, it will pollinate whatever's around. It is also economically beneficial. So you do have social colonies. So in a typical beehive, you might have 40 or 60,000 or 40 to 60,000 bees. Well, that's 40 or 60,000 mini workers that you have working your field. And then if you multiply that times 10 hives, that's a lot of bees, right? Doing all that work pollinating. and they are manageable and movable, so I can move them from field to field, and they do the work for me, right? I just have to keep them happy and alive. And of course, they're charismatic species. I was just looking in the shop over here, and there's little bee hanging sort of things, and then even around, you always see the bee symbol and everything, because everybody loves bees, right? Except when they sting you. So this is an interesting graphic that I came across. This is from Cornell in Ithaca, New York. And what you're looking at is what we call a pollinator network. So if you look on the left-hand side, so if you just kind of picture this as a big circle, so the left-hand side of the circle is all different pollinators. And on the right-hand side of the circle is different plants in that area. And the highlighted red is the honeybee. So that one honeybee goes to all of those different flowers. And the other ones are going to be very smaller. If we look at a couple of them, they only have like 1 or 2 arrows from them, right? So that's one of the reasons we like those honeybees. They're a generalist pollinator. They will go to a variety of different flowers and so forth. So this is just a kind of a pollinator network that researchers sometimes use to figure out what's going on in the area, what pollinators are visiting what flowers. Just a couple quick stats. These are from the University of Florida. Honeybee pollination leads to 15 billion with a B, of the annual value from increased yield and quality of crops just in the U.S. So that's just in the U.S., that's not worldwide. 126 million pounds of honey are produced in the U.S. with a value of about 310 million. And in Florida, where I'm from, 8.8 million pounds of honey was produced in Florida in 2021, 19.8 million. So it is big business. I'm a hobbyist, so I don't make near that amount. I'm a professor at a college, right? So I do produce probably about 100, 200 pounds a year, and I end up having to give about half of that away as Christmas presents and your friends and your neighbors and different things like that. But just to give you kind of an idea of why people raise honeybees, not only for the benefit to the farmers, but you can make a decent amount of money off of that. However, in the last decade, we've had very high colony loss. So this is 21, 22, the weighted average, the winter colony loss was about 25%. So we're losing about 25% of our bees year after year in the winter time. And this is in the U.S., and it gives all the different states. If you're from the U.S., you can kind of get a better idea. In Europe, it's about 20%. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, what they consider a normal winter loss would be about 10%, maybe as high as 15%. But essentially what we're seeing is double the amount of winter loss of honeybees than we did, decades and decades ago. So what's causing all this? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons. There's poor hive management, poor nutrition, pesticide exposure, bad weather, and varroa and other pests. And I'll get to the varroa here on the right-hand side in a minute. They're nasty little buggers, aren't they? So poor hive management, this would be on the beekeeper. They're not checking their hives as regularly as they should. They're not doing everything that they should to manage their hives. Poor nutrition might be part of that management, but it's also some will do pollination contracts, and so they only take their bees to, say, one field, and that's the only nutrition that they're getting. So if you ate only one type of food for every day of your life, you're not going to get all your essential nutrients, right? So that's what we're doing with some of these commercial bees, is they're only going to one type of crop, one type of field over and over for months at a time, and so that's not good for their health. Pesticide exposure is another one. In the media, this gets a lot of attention, but it can impact your bees. It can bring down their populations. You're going to see more of this in your backyard beekeepers who are concerned with losing one hive or two hives. When you have a commercial beekeeper, they're usually very cognizant or aware of where they're putting their hives, and they'll make sure that the farmers aren't spreading pesticides on the crops that they're going to be spraying. Bad weather, this is another factor, especially with climate change. So climate change is impacting not only bee biology, it's making the temperature hotter, but it's changing the blooming times and the seasons for a lot of different plants. So if the bees are producing they're making a lot of babies, anticipating those blooms are going to be there, and then those blooms are now over 2 weeks prior to those new bees emerging, that can be a problem. Also in Florida, we have something called hurricanes. So as a beekeeper, we have to be aware of that and protect our bees and tie those down and so forth. But the one that we're looking at right now is called Varroa, and its full name is Varroa destructor. What a great name, right? So if we look at the picture on the top picture, you can see a pupa. It's basically a bee that was developing, and it was getting ready to emerge after probably another few days. But you can see all the varroa mites kind of crawling on it. So they will nest when they're, after they lay their egg, those varroa mites start to develop inside that, and they start kind of attacking that. So they're going to be bringing viruses and impacting the development of those bees. And this is what it looks like close up. So it's kind of something of your nightmares. So this is one thing that we have been seeing an increased amount of, especially in Florida and the U.S., again, due to climate change and pesticide resistance. So when it first arrived, we were able to control it to a certain extent, but then they developed a resistance to that, so we have to do another technique and so forth. And the fun part is it's an arthropod, right? It's a bug. And the bee is an arthropod, it's a bug. So how do you kill an arthropod that lives on another arthropod without killing the bee, right? So that's what we're having to deal with. Just a little perspective, the varroa mite originated, as far as we know, is in Indonesia, and then it kind of spread, China, India, Germany, Brazil, and it reached the US and Canada in the late 1980s. This is a map from 2001, and if you look in Australia, it says no infestation. However, that changed just this year. So at the beginning, kind of the spring, they started detecting it. And so their initial thought was, we want the whole continent to be varroa mite free because it causes a lot of problems. So when they found it in a hive, they would burn that hive, and they would go 50 miles all the way around that hive and burn every hive around it because they don't want that varroa mite. But just last month, they threw up their hands and they're like, it's here and there's nothing we can do about it. So those beekeepers in Australia and New Zealand, or more in Australia, they're starting to try to figure out, and we're starting to get emails and different things like, how do you guys deal with this, because it's new to us. So the varroa mite is basically here to stay. However, even with all these losses in the winter and the climate change that they're dealing with and everything like that, honeybee colony levels have remained stable, at least in the U.S. So we do have two, measurements. One is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the other is from the National Honey Service report data. They're government entities. They do similar things, but they're separate entities. That's why their data is a little bit skewed. But if you look, you would expect with all these problems, those honeybees, their populations would be going down year after year. But they're not. And the reason for this is bees are economically viable, and we have beekeepers that tend to them. They're livestock to a certain extent. They're an agriculture benefit. So for every loss that we have, we are making another split in the spring to maintain our level of hives that we want to have. So I personally have about 5 to 10 hives. I'm a hobbyist beekeeper. And if I lose 2 or 3, well, the next spring I will make those, and I will always maintain 5 to 10 hives in my apiary. Now, if all 10 died, I might just, throw up my arms. But commercial beekeepers, so if a commercial beekeeper has 100, 200, 300 hives, even if they have a great loss, they're going to replace those. So that's why we've been able to maintain those high honeybee elevations. So when you're worried about honeybee pollination, You don't really have to worry about that. We know the honeybee. We've done a lot of research. We can keep those numbers up to a certain extent to help those farmers out. What we do have to worry about, however, is other pollinators. So other pollinators that you may or may not know of, we have this wonderful picture of some bats. We have those lovely hummingbirds. I got to see some today. They were beautiful. And I did look up on the website the Dutch Caribbean Biodiversity Database. It's a great resource. I highly recommend it. So there's some cacti on some of your islands here, and their only pollinators for those cacti are these two species of bats. We have a Miller's long-tongued bat and the southern long-nosed bat. And I will tell you the southern long-nosed bat is actually vulnerable, so it's almost getting to the point of being endangered. So if you lose those pollinators, you can, see an impact on those cacti that are going to be trying to survive and so forth. We also have lots of butterflies. I saw, zebra butterfly today. That was really pretty. So different pollinators will target different types of flowers. So the pollinators, Lepidoptera, which is going to be your, basically your butterflies and moths and so forth, but they tend to like the bright flowers, the red, the orange, purple. They should have some spicy odor. Maybe they don't have one. Where the nectar is very ample, so they'll be able to reach their mouth parts down and kind of suck up that nectar. And it's usually deeply hidden, so they can land on a flat surface and stick their tongues down there and get their nectar. We also have lots of beetles. Beetles are also efficient pollinators. Again, they're going to target a slightly different type of flower. Usually it's a dull white or a green. And they're usually large and bowl-like. Nectar may be present, or it may not be, and it is not usually hidden, though. So that's a flower longhorn beetle. And we also have those beautiful flies that everybody loves. But these flowers that they usually target are pale and dull to dark. Usually they have that nice veining through them. And sometimes they have a putrid smell, like a rotting meat or something like that. So these are not the types of flowers you want to put in your house. So these types of flowers will bloom during the day or night, and nectar is usually not present. And of course, we have our lovely honeybee that everybody loves. This bee, you can kind of see in its rear leg there, the pollen basket, so it's collecting that pollen. Those flowers that they tend to visit are going to be bright white, yellow, blue. They may or may not have a smell, and the nectar is usually present. But the honeybee is just one species of bee. So in Florida, we have about 316 species of bees. In the US, about 4,000, and worldwide, there are 25,000 species of bees. But we're only concerned about the honeybees, right? So about a third of all pollination studies concentrates on the honeybee. But there's 25,000 other bees. And this is just the bees, not the beetles, not the butterflies, not the bats, so you can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Honeybees, there's only about 6 or 7 species of honeybees that are true honey producers that make enough honey that we can harvest from them. The vast majority of other bees are going to be solitary bees. They might target only 1 or 2 types of plants to pollinate. So we do have to worry about the 24,999 other bees that we need to be concerned about. There was a wonderful study just from 2022 where they looked at a bunch of different crops, and they categorized them as either having global importance or local importance, the different crops. So global important crops are crops that would be grown and then are going to be shipped away, and those are the ones that are going to be traded and so forth. Where the local importance ones are typically grown in an area and then they just stay in that area to feed the local populations. And if we look at kind of the disparity there, you see that pretty much the butterflies, the beetles, the bats, the birds, and everything like that are very important to the local economy or the local plants, where the bees and the flies are more for the commercial type ventures. So one thing to kind of take away is nocturnal pollinators are critical pollinators, but their contribution is often neglected, right? So if you want to become a researcher, this is a great area to start to pursue. And the decline of non-bee pollinators shows the need for an inclusive conservation agenda, because they're still subjected to the weather changes, right? They're subjected to nutrition if plants go extinct, if they're decimated, if they're affected by the local ecology and so forth. So if you're seeing a decline in your bee populations that we do manage, you definitely are going to be seeing a decline in the non-bee population. We're just not monitoring it as closely, and we're not as concerned with it because they don't make us money, right? So how you can help, because you guys all want to help, right? Yeah, okay. So do I have any teachers out here? Any teachers? All right. Okay, so you might want to get out your phones, because I do have some QR codes that you might be scanning on certain slides. So number one, whether you are a beekeeper or a non-beekeeper, is your habitat, right? Because that's where everybody's getting their food from. You should focus on native plants to your area, different flowering plants throughout the season, so they can change their nutrition month after month, and it's going to support multiple pollinators. So lots of different, in this picture you see lots of different colors, lots of different sizes. They're all going to be supporting different pollinators, right? And that'll give us a healthy ecosystem. You can design and build nest sites. So how many built that today? Yeah. So these are a little bit more artistic. They spend a little bit more time with them, but basically the one in the middle is very similar to what you guys produced. They put a little roof on it with some pine cones and some glue, and they made it pretty, but you get the idea. You can also just do, other projects where you do some recycling, use the bamboo and so forth. And then we do have larger bee hotels that sometimes you see on campuses in the U.S. So how this works, I tried to explain it while we were building those nests. But if we look at the reed tube box that's on the left, so that's what, if you're looking at it straight forward. So if we look at a tube, this is what it's going to look like. So these are your solitary bees. They're going to basically lay different cells, and in each cell they're going to be putting an egg and some supplies to help that egg develop. Towards the back of the tube there's going to be females. Towards the front of the tube there's going to be males. And this is because when the male emerges, it's going to be able to basically be ready to fertilize the females once they do emerge. So a lot of the 24,999 other bees, a lot of them might develop in these types of situations. The other thing you can do is make sure that your ground cover is available to bees. 70% of those bees that I mentioned before nest in tunnels and the bare earth. So I know when you think of bees, everybody just thinks of those nice, beehives and different things that we monitor, but 70% of those native bees or their solitary bees are going to nest in the earth. 30% will lay their eggs in cavities like those tubes or holes in masonry or different things. So you can mulch less or shallower layers, and that'll allow the bees to still penetrate into the ground, or if they laid stuff in the ground, they'll still be able to emerge in the spring when it's ready. Also avoid pesticides and herbicides. And I live in Florida, and we have lots of pests, and we have like huge cockroaches, and so I do use pesticides. And I realize that a lot of you might use pesticides, but there are different practices that you can utilize. So if your plant is infested, you can spray it before the blooms start, before the bees visit it. You can spray it at night when the bees are not active, because they're only going to be active during the day. So there's different techniques that you can use to not impact the bees as much. Okay, if you are interested in becoming a community scientist or support researchers, there's a QR code for the University of Florida. This is the IFAS, and this is actually where I got my my master beekeeper license through. This is a great resource. At the University of Florida, they have a world-renowned bee lab where they do cutting-edge research on what's going on with your bees. So you just want to donate money, you can adopt a bee. There's online courses for beekeepers, so I don't know if anybody's interested in becoming a beekeeper on the island, but it'll walk you through all the different techniques. You have to videotape yourself, and they will check that you're doing things correctly, and you can work your way through a certification. You can join a mailing list, and then there's also a ton of beekeeper resources as well with the latest research. As I mentioned before, pollinators are also important. So backyard beetles and pollinators, there is a lot of research projects going on. So this project is currently accepting participants through the Ecological Research and Education Network. If you scan that, you'll be able to get lesson plans. It'll tell you exactly how they want you to conduct that study, and it'll allow you to report your results to them directly, so you get a better idea of what's going on globally. You can save the bees by taking photos. Everybody has a phone these days, right? So you can learn to identify bees from their lookalikes using the Bee Conservancy. There's a naturalist app. You can join their project, share your observations. And I don't know if you can see all of this, but this is a map of observations. And on the left-hand side with all those reds, those are a lot in the US. But if you look where you guys are, there's no red dots. Shame on you guys. So the event is in progress right now. I mean, we have people in Australia participating. We have people in Europe participating. So you can scan that code and join the efforts to find a bee or a lookalike. And this would be very helpful for researchers as well. I know when I was trying to prepare for this project, I was like, do you even have honeybees on the island? I knew nothing about the insect population here other than a couple snippets here and there. So by contributing to the worldwide database, you're producing a lot of information, not only for people like me who come to this wonderful island, but researchers all around the globe. And you get to learn a little bit about bees and figure out which ones are the lookalikes, which ones are the good bees, which ones maybe are not necessarily the ones that you want around. Also in the Caribbean, there's this gentleman who is doing climate smart techniques, sustainable education, and the green economy. So he's championing, I can't even say that word, He's basically promoting, he's promoting bees with UNESCO, I can't talk anymore, on the Caribbean islands, St. Kitts. So there is stuff going on in the islands. And of course, always support your local beekeepers and education initiatives. So I like to take my demonstration hive, again, it would be here if the plane would allow me to bring it, to a lot of different events. And I also go to a lot of different schools and I show my bees, and it gets the kids interested in asking lots of questions. As part of Pinellas County, the county that I'm from, we just became what is called a Bee City USA. It was just awarded this year. And what that means is, as an individual, you can make a lot of contributions, right? But we need to do large scale. We need infrastructure changes. And so this kind of promotes that. It's committed to the best practices. So they have changed the way that they spray pesticides. They have changed the way they plant certain plants in their parks and systems to support those different pollinators, using a lot of more native plants. So by becoming a Bee City USA, you agree to and you monitor, and you have to provide reporting to incorporate pollinator conscious practices into those city policies and plans. So large scale changes is going to have larger scale impact rather than the individual. And just a couple different things that we've had citizen science events for that. Just last month we had Bee City USA BioBlitz. And so this is a great event where we invited the public to come to a park and they noted all the different pollinators and we were able to kind of keep track of that and provide education and also get some scientific data at the same time. And we also did, this was just last week, surprising native bees in Pinellas County. So again, we're not just concentrating on the honeybees, but just all the other native bees that you may or may not know is a bee. So we host a lot of free public educational events. And I will take questions in 1 second. I just want to point out, I did bring some honey over here. So if you're interested in trying a couple different types of honey, and I do have a lovely poster with different kinds of bees. So if you're interested in seeing the different sizes of bees and different things like that, after my talk and after I take questions, you're more than welcome to hang out over here with my lovely assistant, Mr. Bee Lady, and kind of do that. So, any questions? Oh, thank you. Yes.
Are your farmers in a hurry to put set-asides, if you know what I mean by set-asides?
Oh,
In Britain, the farmers can have to leave, they did have to leave, a large wild areas of natural.
okay. Okay.
Pollinators.
Right. So the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, so in certain countries they're going to do what they call set-asides, where they have to leave a certain portion of their land wild, growing free for their pollinators, and she was asking if farmers in the U.S. have to do that. It is a great idea. As far as I know, I don't believe they have to. Yeah. I do know, I have friends who are commercial pollinators, and so they will make sure that they're not going to be spraying on the crops, but as far as the other portion, however, I know the Pinellas County, we're taking some of the areas that were just concrete barriers in between lanes of highways and different things, and so we're rewilding those areas to promote kind of more of the wildflowers in that respect. But as far as farmers, I don't believe that they have to. I think they can use every little bit of land. I mean, again, I'm not a farmer, so I could be wrong, but as far as I know, I have not heard that.
Because the big commercial farmers have completely denuded soil.
Right. Yeah. So the comment was just commercial farmers just really stripped the whole area of wildlife. And that, I think, happens a large part. And we also have a lot of industrial farming in the U.S., so you will drive down an expressway and you'll be driving for an hour, and all you see is like tobacco fields or soybean, and it's just a monocrop as opposed to a variety. But good question, good points. Any other questions? Yes?
Any idea how many different varieties of bees are?
The question was, did I know how many different varieties of bees on here, Saba? That's where you guys come in. I looked on the internet. I was looking for variety. I know that I've been here. I have seen honeybees. But as far as your native bees, I don't know what is here or anything. I don't know if you can point me to a resource, that would be great. But, you know, if you participate in some of these events, then it really gives us a better idea of what is here. Yes?
There was a scientist, I think his name is Hugh, he's a Dutch guy, he comes regularly, and he came into my garden because he saw different kinds of bees in there, so I'll contact him.
Okay. So she's just going to provide me contact information with another scientist who was here earlier. Okay, that's great. I would love that. Yes. I'm sorry, the light is kind of blocking me and it's hard to see. So the question was, will the bees fly here like a new species and just start pollinating? How far is the nearest island? I don't, like in terms of distance. 18 miles would be quite a distance for a bee to fly, so I don't think they would. The only way you'd get probably a bee is through the shipping, or if you had larvae, if you had eggs, if you had something along those lines coming in through your shipping. Or potentially hurricanes. Yeah, we just had flamingos up in Wisconsin from the last hurricane that came through Florida, so that was kind of crazy. Yeah, so usually that's how a new species is going to arrive. And we do have some invasive species coming. We do have the Asian hornet that just came to the U.S. in kind of our northwest region. Hopefully we're eradicated it. We're keeping our fingers crossed and monitoring that. Pardon? Which ones don't you want? Well, I wouldn't want that Asian hornet. That would be a bad one to have. I guess they're pretty large, and they'll be able to sting through a standard beekeeper outfit. Yeah, and their stings I've heard. I've never been stung by one, but I've heard that they're really nasty. So when they do to eradicate them, they wear full hazmat suits to try to destroy those nests and different things. But the Asian hornet, as far as I know, no. I think they are just a predatory insect that is going to kill other insects as part of the ecosystem. And again, they're foreign. Not that the European honeybee is native to the U.S., but we consider them beneficial. That Asian hornet would just kind of be another headache for beekeepers in the U.S. to kind of deal with, as well as people. They can sting people as well.
Is there any sign that the bees are actually
Okay, so that's a very good question. So the question was, are the bees changing or evolving due to the virus? Because the virus has been around for decades. So there's two trains of thought with this. So you could have the varroa mite basically come to your island, and you can just allow them to run wild through your hives and kill every single bee that they can kill, and the resistant ones would survive, right? And they would be evolved to combat that varroa mite. However, you're going to have to wait many, many years, and on a large scale, we can't. There are some anecdotal evidence of certain types of bees being more hygienic and like cleaning themselves a little bit better to get the varroa mite off, but you have to weigh that with honey production, temperament. So it's trying to create the perfect bee for the perfect situation that you want it, right? And you can buy different types of queens from different parts of the world. So there's Russian queens, there's Carnolian queens, there's Italian queens, and they all have different characteristics to a certain extent. And then you can try to mix different varieties and try to get the perfect bee. But unless you're willing to, basically give the whole bee population up to the varroa mite and then just wait, potentially decades for that one that can resist it to populate.
I presume it affects all bees, not just the honeybee?
Well, so one of the things, the honeybee is going to be the question was, does it affect other bees and not just the honeybee? The honeybee, it's a social insect, so it's going to be in a large colony. So that's when they are able to reproduce over and over again. They're going to be affecting that honeybee more so than the other types of bees, because the other types of bees are not growing in that type of environment that maximizes the life cycle of the varroa mite. So wasps, they can be the social wasps, the ones that you have in a, you know, a big wasp nest, and then there are also solitary wasps. And as you know, I really don't know because I don't study wasps. I'm more concerned with the honeybee and managing that. But yeah, I would have to look that one up. I don't know that one. Wasps and hornets can be pollinators. Not all of them. Same with not every bee is going to be a pollinator. It's such a large variety. So you are going to have some that are pollinators and some that are not. But they're not all out just to get you. Okay. Yes. Question. Uh-huh. So, so the question or the comment was she has some plants that the bees love, and then sometimes they drown in, say, the bird bath or the syrup or different things, and she was asking if she should preserve those insects and start to categorize them. I would just use the iNaturalist app. And then you don't have to preserve them. You just take a quick picture of them. Yeah, and then you'll be able to kind of guess, make your best guess, and then it actually goes to a person. They're based in New York, and they will verify that you made the right identification or not. And so that's. I don't know how quickly they get back to you, but that's one thing you can do rather than preserving them and shipping them to me, because I don't want this. I don't want dead bugs in my mailbox.
Okay, there's an app for plants, but I guess it's for wild plants only.
Okay.
But I guess it's a picture of a butterfly on the little app.
Yeah, so she's looking at the app now. Yes, it does a lot of different projects. So it can be with plants, it can be with insects, it can be with animals. So if you go to kind of the main web page, it'll take you step by step to get to the pollinator database. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. So the question was the flow hive. I'm sure you've all seen this one on YouTube. Okay. So she's asking what my take is on the flow hive. So the flow hive is something that was developed, 2-3 years ago? COVID really messed me up, like my years, so it might have been 5 years ago. I'm not quite sure. So the flow hive is designed so normally when you take, hang on. So normally when you harvest honey, you have a big box and it has frames in it, and you have to take the frames out, decap it, put it in a spinner. There's a whole complicated process. So the flow hive was developed where the cells, you turn a crank, and the cells basically split, and the honey would just kind of roll directly into more or less a tube system, and you just put your jar on and you turn the tap and honey just flows out. So it's like perfect, right? No mess, perfect. Those flow hives tend to be a lot more expensive, around $700, $800 since I last checked, whereas a regular, hive, you can either make one or buy one for like less than $100, right? So there's a big investment. I personally don't like the flow hives because I think it promotes lazy beekeeping to a certain extent. A lot of people with flow hives, they just think that they can go buy some bees, put them in there, and they never have to check them or take care of them. Not in all cases. I do have some friends who have the flow hives that do the regular maintenance and so forth, but we have one of the flow hives at our apiary. We did it as an experiment because a lot of people were asking, and we've been getting a lot of what we call hive beetles in it because you're unable to really pull the frames out. So where the honey's being stored, those hive beetles are starting to like hide in all the little nooks and crannies. So it hasn't been very advantageous, at least in Florida, to have that flow hive because we do have those hive beetles hiding in every little bit that are very hard to get to. So I prefer the more traditional, it's called a Langstrom hive, because number one, it's cheaper. And number two, it's easier to kind of access and everything like that. The flow hives do look pretty, I do give you that. But I feel like I can get more honey out of my the traditional hives. I know, it is too good to be true sometimes, yeah? If you just go to YouTube and look it up and it's just like, oh, this is backyard beekeeping, and somebody just puts on a veil and they take a jar and they turn it and they're like, oh, perfect honey, and then they go back inside. Beekeeping is not like that. You will get stung, trust me. Okay, any other questions? Yes, another question.
In the cold, say north of Canada,
Uh-huh.
do you have to feed the bees over the winter?
So the question was, if you're a northern beekeeper, say Canada, do you have to feed the bees over the winter time? So a responsible beekeeper is going to leave some honey for them to overwinter. In kind of northern climates, they're going to insulate their hives. Some of them will kind of move them inside to maybe a barn or a warehouse or something along those lines. The bee activity is going to slow down a lot, so they're not going to be flying around or different things. And usually they should have enough storage to kind of support their, winter and emerge fresh in the spring. So if you pulled all their honey, then yes, you would have to supplement some of their diet to a certain extent, yes.
What is the normal lifespan of a bee?
Ooh, normal lifespan of a bee. So I'll speak on behalf of honeybees, not the other types of bees. So there's 3 types of castes or kind of types of bees in a hive. So you have your queen bee, which everybody loves. They always want to see the queen bee. You have worker bees, and then you have drones, and drones are the male bees. So a queen bee can live on average, if we didn't do anything to her, probably 3-4 years. However, after about a year, we usually pinch her and we kill her because her laying is going to slow down, and we need her to lay lots of eggs every single day. So she can lay 1,000, 2,000 eggs a day. She's a very busy bee. The worker bees, she has to lay that amount because the worker bees, when the honey season is going, they'll only live 4 to 6 weeks. In the wintertime, that can be extended because they're not active, they're not wearing their body down or different things. So that can be extended in colder periods or different things like that. But when the honey is flowing, it's going to be about 4 to 6 weeks that they live. And the same with the drones. They only live as long as they are to fertilize the queen, or if they don't fertilize the queen, about 4 to 6 weeks on average. Yeah. Question was, do they venture far away from the hive? Another good question. So the bees, they do have kind of a preference of about half a mile from their hive. They want to kind of go to that general area. They can go as far as, 5 miles radius from their hive, which is about, 8 kilometers? About 8 kilometers. So, sorry? So the bees from the bottom, you wouldn't find them in Hell's Gate. I don't know the difference, but probably. Okay, so probably not. But you'd have a lot of continuity. So you'd have bees interacting with this bees, which interact with that bee, and so forth. So you could have some genetic exchange still between those two. Maybe not, directly flying from there. But yes.
What about elevation?
Elevation. So Florida is really flat, so I do know about that. I don't know about elevation, actually. I've never had to deal with that in Florida. That's a good question. I know bees can, live in higher elevations, lower elevations, but I don't know what their limit is, and I don't know on the island where they'd be found. If anybody has any anecdotal evidence of maybe climbing to the top, which I'm contemplating, if you've seen any hives up there or wild hives, I don't know. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We have, as we said, our upcoming presentation. Tomorrow is kind of a quiet day, so everybody has a day of rest, including us. And we'll look for you on Monday. And by all means, we're available at the tent tomorrow, or contact us via social media, WhatsApp, email, whatever works for you. Please support our sponsor tonight, Busy Bee Bakery. They have some great food, beverages. If you're getting up and leaving, we'd appreciate if you take your chair in that direction. Coochie's going to pick them up shortly. Okay? Thank you. And there's honey up here if you want to try.
One of which is, I believe the National Resource Conservation Service, NRCS at USDA, will pay people to do set-aside kind of thing. It's not mandatory, but I think they